In 2006, National Geographic published the works of a lost gospel called the Gospel of Judas that captivated the attention of the media. Many tried to propose this represented a lost sect of early Christianity from the first century, but the experts that studied the text never asserted this or came to this conclusion. The overwhelming consensus was this gospel should be dated to around the same time as the Gospel of Thomas, in the mid to late 2nd century. We only have one Coptic manuscript of Judas, which is fragmented and dates to the late 3rd century. However, we believe the manuscript was originally composed about 100 years before this, possibly in Greek, because early church father St. Irenaeus mentions its existence when talking about a Gnostic group called the Cainites. And furthermore, they declare that Judas the traitor was thoroughly acquainted with these things, and that he alone, knowing the truth as no others did, accomplished the mystery of the betrayal. By him all things, both earthly and heavenly, were thus thrown into confusion. They produced a fictitious history of this kind, which they style the Gospel of Judas. So how do we know Judas belongs in the 2nd century? Well, scholars argue it doesn't resemble pre-70 AD Jewish beliefs, customs, or language, but more resembles Greek Gnostic ideas associated with other texts from the late 2nd century. Judas talks about aeons, archons, and has some pretty harsh ideas about the God of the Hebrew Bible. We don't see these beliefs at all in 1st century Judea, especially among Jewish rabbis, like the historical Jesus. We see these beliefs in other texts from the late 2nd century, which fit more with Neoplatonic or Gnostic ideas. If Judas belonged in the 1st century prior to 70 AD, it would be the exception and be out of place. It would not actually fit with other works which date to that time. It fits far better with later texts in the 2nd and 3rd century, and therefore it is more probable that it dates to around that time. Darrell Bach and Dan Wallace say, studying the Gospel of Judas is like discovering a document about Napoleon discussing tactics with his officers, only to find him mentioning nuclear submarines and B-52 bombers. The Jesus of the canonical Gospels does resemble a Jewish rabbi from pre-70 AD Judea in how he speaks and the Jewish context associated with his life and ministry. Jesus in the Gospel of Judas sounds more like a Greek philosopher who uses much later terms and philosophical views we simply do not see in 1st century Judea. Such strange and anti-Jewish teachings would have been unfamiliar to the disciples, and it is unlikely such ideas would have even attracted any Jews as disciples. In all likelihood, if the historical Jesus said the things he did in Judas, the disciples would have accused him of blasphemy and tried to stone him. The Gnostic document is an interesting take on what the Cainites believed. Now there's an important thing we need to point out. There was no group in the 2nd or 3rd century that called themselves Gnostics. There were various groups we have dubbed as Gnostics because they believed the path to salvation was not through the atoning power of Christ, but through obtaining secret knowledge and freeing yourself from the physical plane so you could ascend to the divine realm. Judas follows along nicely with these ideas. The Gospel opens with Jesus eating with his disciples. They pray over their meal and Jesus laughs at them. A laughing or mocking Jesus is pretty common in Gnostic works. The disciples ask Jesus why he is laughing at them, and he replies that he's not laughing at them, but that their God will be praised through this. See, Gnostic groups didn't believe the God of the Hebrew Bible was the one true God, but a lesser corrupt deity that created the physical realm, and that was who the Jews worshipped. Jesus was not sent by the God of the Bible, but a different and more powerful group of gods called the Aeons. The disciples respond by saying, "Master, you are the Son of our God." To which Jesus replies, "How do you know me? Truly I say to you, no generation of the people that are among you will know me." Scholars believe this teaches that the Jews and the first apostles of Christianity were ignorant to the truth, which the Gnostics were actually aware of. Gnostic groups very much wanted to argue they had secret truth that Jesus taught that the early church missed. So continuing on, this of course makes the disciples angry, and Jesus notices this and responds that their God has provoked them to anger, and asks for the strongest among them to stand before him and look at his face. None of the disciples are able to do this, but Judas is able to at least stand before Jesus, without looking him in the eyes. And then he says, "I know who you are and where you have come from. You are from the immortal realm of Barbelo, and I am not worthy to utter the name of the one who has sent you." As you can see, this is not your standard Jewish text. Barbelo is a Gnostic aeon, or goddess, so to speak, who is often depicted as the highest female entity or mother. She was considered in some texts to be the first emanation of the divine beings. She is common within the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, further cementing the fact that Judas belongs with this time frame in these other late documents. After this, Judas is told by Jesus that he will give him secret Gnostic teachings. So Judas asks a question, and this Gnostic Jesus, instead of answering him, disappears. The next day, Jesus reappears to the disciples. Now remember, many Gnostic groups denied Jesus came in the flesh, so it is common in Gnostic writings to see Jesus acting more as a spirit than a physical person that walks around. However, as we'll go over later, this manuscript seems to think Jesus had some type of body. They ask about